Without a doubt, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak is one of the most iconic watch designs of all time, having helped to define the integrated bracelet sport watch category that is now enjoying unprecedented levels of popularity and rapidly ascending aftermarket prices. Today though, we're going to look at the 41mm Royal Oak 15400 ST, an impressive watch by any metric, but one that also begs the question of whether or not the level of hype is really justified. In this one, we'll take a little bit of a closer look at this example, but also more importantly, use it as a baseline for discussing the entire Royal Oak line in 2022. Let's jump into it. So before we dive into this video, if you are interested in more in-depth analysis and look at the AP Royal Oak and its history, and more of a complete rundown on the entire model family after 50 years, check out our recent write-up on teddybaldassarre.com, where we talk a little bit more in greater detail on this iconic piece when it comes to the different references and more into the backstory and creation and some new updates on the modern collection. We are of course going to talk about some of that today, but that one will go into more of the backstory here. But kind of segueing off of that, let's start with just a brief backstory on this brand as well as the Royal Oak. Now, Audemars Piguet was founded in Switzerland back in 1875 and remains independently operated to this day, an impressive feat in the now highly conglomerated world of luxury watch brands. In the early to mid 20th century, AP was known for its collection of elegant dress watches and chronographs, as well as for innovating the world of complications, having been early in development of the jumping hour, skeletonized calibers, and ultra-thin watches, all that helped them in solidifying their spot in the Swiss holy watchmaking trinity alongside Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin. Now, despite these unquestionable laurels and the rich heritage of the brand, the 1970s and the events of the quartz crisis challenged every brand, including AP. With a new industry focus on quartz as well as sportier watches led in part by Rolex, these elements combined to endanger the tier of watchmaking that defined AP's very existence. In 1971 though, AP's director reached out to Dutch designer Gerald Genta, a man who was developing quite the reputation following his unique design contributions to the Universal Genève pole router and the Omega Constellation family, and asked for a completely new stainless steel sport watch design. Although it is a bit of legend at this stage, the story often goes that the Royal Oak's basic design was created almost overnight before a Basel fair, with the first production model, the 5402 A series, made available in 1972, a design that is just as relevant today as ever, at least that design formula, and helped pave the way for further creations such as the Nautilus in 1976 and the 222 in 1977. Over its now 50 years on the market, the Royal Oak family has come to include hundreds of different models and a wide array of complications. But today, again, we have the more basic 41mm Royal Oak 15400 ST, originally unveiled in 2012 and has since seen a successor, but we'll use it as a kind of springboard to speak more generally about the Royal Oak and what it means to the world of watchmaking in 2022. But let's begin by just kind of highlighting some of the main components and just reviewing this watch. So to begin with the conversation on the case and wearing experience presented by the 15400, the watch offers up the aforementioned 41mm diameter paired with an extended 51.6mm lug-to-lug metric, 9.7mm thickness. Now at this point, it is important to note that this is the larger of the two most central and standard Royal Oak models, with the even more popular jumbo 15202 coming in at 39mm, with the overall dimensions more closely based on the original 1972 reference. Now this 41mm variant presents a sizable presence on wrist, wearing closer to that of a 42mm, but it is aided by the downswept nature of the lugs on the central case design. Keeping in mind that this is in many ways and just has kind of become a sort of statement piece, so excess size might not be as strong of a consideration for some, it still is a larger watch. Digging into one of the watch's most prominent attributes, we have a case architecture and finishing displayed that, when viewed all together, are a central aspect of what makes this design just format so legendary. An 8-sided bezel stands atop the faceted case with vertical brushing and 8 hexagonal screws on its flat upper surface and eye-catching polishing along the facets that slope towards the central case. This robust execution from steel is stark in its facets and angles, with a linear brush finish on the anterior side that gives way to neat hits of polishing along the slender bevel, traveling the tops of the lugs, the edge of the bezel, and the many facets on the bracelet links. At 3, a 6-sided signed screw-down crown is anchored without the protection of crown guards and works in tandem with the case back in securing this model's pedestrian but adequate 50 meters of water resistance. This being an integrated bracelet watch, there is no traditional lug width to mention, with the case undertaking a smooth transition to this excellent bracelet with the help of 2 hinged inner links. The bracelet's fit and finish is frankly fantastic, with substantial screwed links that are largely vertically brushed with impressively polished inner segments throughout. Tapering from 26 millimeters where it meets the watch case to 18 millimeters, the clasp is a positive feeling push-button dual deployant model that works well and is finished inside and out while foregoing the use of any micro adjustment, which could find making a perfect fit increasingly difficult, though we didn't have any trouble when sizing this one up. Overall, this is one of the best finished examples of a case and bracelet on a sports watch, no questions asked. And if you're looking at the market, and it really demonstrates that artistry and capabilities of AP as a brand without overstepping into the land of complete ostentatiousness. So a perfectly flat sapphire crystal equipped with anti-reflective coating sits flush with the bezel, allowing a clear view of that blue tapisserie dial underneath. In addition, it has a slender polished baton handset at the center, faceted applied linear indices over that textured backdrop. This hobnail texture is created through an engine turning method, and with the help of machine operated Rose engine, a special type of lathe that makes carefully coordinated series of tiny cuts into the dial's metal surface to create this pattern. So no pressing here, although it is going to be utilized by machine. And AP did release a nice video kind of demonstrating how they're doing this. So pretty cool that they're actually at least showing some level of transparency here. This is often a lot of brands, they just don't do this. And I can link to that video down below if you are interested in it. So this tapisserie dial, especially in this striking blue color, is beautiful and fits well with the otherwise exceedingly well finished case elements. While lume is utilized on both the hands and indices, it does not glow that impressively with its incandescence, but again should offer enough legibility in reduced lighting environments if you do need to. Dial text here is also minimal, with an applied AP signature brand wordmark and automatic at 6, interrupting an otherwise clean execution. At 3, a step date aperture gives way to a color match wheel underneath that adds everyday utility to this design without being distracting. Now turning the 15400 over, we have the in-house caliber, the 3120 oscillating within. Now before we discuss this movement, it is important to note that with the 15500 that was released in 2019, AP also introduced some new calibers with the 4302 with a 4 Hz beat rate and a 70-hour power reserve that replaced the 3120 with its 3 Hz, 21,600 vibrations per hour and 60 hours of power reserve. The 3120 is relatively well decorated with Geneva ways across the central bridges, polished screwed heads and countersinks, some englage on the bridge edges and perlage across the base plate, and a prominent engraved gold winding rotor. In terms of general operation and specifications, again, we're looking at 21,600 vibrations per hour, 3 Hz. It does feature hacking and hand winding, hacking stopping the second hand when you pull the crown to the farthest position, and a 60-hour power reserve. Now, speaking anecdotally to timekeeping and accuracy, now this particular example was just received back from service, and it had a rather pedestrian -9 to -7 seconds a day when you test across those 5 positions. That was the range of accuracy. Not to say that this is the worst thing in the world. I think people, if you're looking for a watch of this degree, probably don't care that much about accuracy, but I could also see some people getting the pitchforks ready saying that this is nowhere close as it should be when you're talking about this price range and accuracy. Just one example, but just wanted to throw that out there. But now with covering just this 15400, yes, that is something I wanted to do with this video, but I also wanted to use it as kind of a baseline for just kind of more discussing where does the Royal Oak sit nowadays? What are the kind of the good and bad associated with this watch, I think from a 2022 perspective. Now, first off, we're looking at the 50-year anniversary this year of the Royal Oak. And I think first, before we even look at maybe some of the cons associated with just this model family, I think you have to applaud the fact that this watch is still relevant. This design still feels fresh. Brands are falling over themselves to kind of replicate something similar. In 2022, brands are unveiling designs that are somewhat similar to this one when you're talking about this integrated bracelet style, which you could argue is the most maybe popular and had the greatest fervor ever around this model, style, and design. The fact that 50 years later, this design is still fresh and is going to be replicated by so many, I think speaks volumes to the iconic stature that this watch has been able to sustain over the years. In addition, there's been a lot of talk about the Nautilus and what's going on there. The Nautilus, I don't think would ever have happened if it wasn't for the Royal Oak, and I think many people would agree with that, just because this was the first to jump on the scene of popularizing this idea of a stainless steel luxury sports watch from this segment of watchmaking. In 1972, I could only imagine what social media would have been saying at that time. I don't know, it probably very similar to some other recent releases that we've seen. One thing I've noticed is I think icons are created with a point of maybe contention at the beginning. There's not a universal love typically always associated. Sometimes there is, but controversy can sometimes bring iconic stature later on. You have to push the envelope, and that's what the Royal Oak did at the time of its initial launch. But then now speaking to some of the challenges with the Royal Oak nowadays, yes, it's an icon, but maybe so much so that it's just fatigued people. It's so funny when you look back at what people will say all the time, like, okay, AP, do something new. Release the code 1159, they get trashed for trying to do something new. So I think right now, one of the biggest challenges for AP is also one of their greatest successes. The shadow of the Royal Oak is so hard to step out of. You can't get out of its way. It's such a huge, monumentous release for the entire world of watchmaking that it's become this double-edged sword for the brand, I'm sure. I'm sure they absolutely, with the release of the offshores, the jumbos, all of these different models that are within this collection, of course, love the upside and popularity of them. But on the flip side, you also have the challenges of what's next, what's different. You know, Patek, if you look at across the aisle, I mean, they are doing other things. I mean, you could say they have two icons in the sports category with the Aquanaut and looking at the Nautilus. You could say the offshore is going to be a different type of creation, which I think is a fair take, but I think there's more separation between an Aquanaut and a Nautilus, and that's not considering many of the grand complications, also looking at the Calatrava, the Ellipse, all these other models that people are very quick to recognize from the brand. And then given the availability factor of these watches, it's only kind of furthered in putting the pressure on just what can AP do next. Can they be a brand that's more than just the Royal Oak? I think they do offer some different watches that, of course, I think they're great, but they don't have that one model that they can lean on, and they're highly leveraged on this one model family and design, which might be the case for many brands out there, but maybe even more so for this brand because the level that the Royal Oak has obtained is unprecedented in the world of watchmaking. And I think in many ways, if I had to sum up the Royal Oak, it's both the greatest blessing, but also maybe the greatest curse that's ever been produced by one brand. I can't think of another brand that is so tied to one model and has, of course, reaped the benefits of the success, but also are really trying to navigate what does the future hold for, say, another collection, and especially from an esteemed brand like AP, which is in a class of their own in many ways for what they do. But I'd love to see your guys' comments down below. What do you think of the AP Royal Oak 50 years later for this design? What is your general take on the entire model family? This is one that I think gets a lot of people talking. It's a difficult one to unpack because it is such an iconic watch, but on the flip side, you have the availability problems, you have the idea that, of course, a lot of the same old has just been happening for many years with the model family, but can you really update an icon in a tasteful manner without stripping away maybe the very backbone of what made it the icon in the first place? That's the challenge I think that this brand is facing. But I'd love to see your comments down below. What do you think of the AP Royal Oak nowadays in 2022? Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that as well. Definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the new products that we carry. In addition, if you want to stay up to date with the content, be sure to follow along on Instagram and see some great photos of watches in the process. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.